This video is about the unspoken truths of Germany's war history. Subscribe for more. The year was 1945, the air heavy with smoke and the distant echoes of gunfire still ringing in the hearts of a fractured Europe. Amidst the ruins of Berlin, a city once teeming with life, stood Emil Fischer, a war-weary German soldier. His uniform, tattered and stained, bore the marks of countless battles fought for a cause that now lay in ashes. Emil's once bright blue eyes mirrored the shattered landscape around him, reflecting both the loss of his homeland and the moral quandary that plagued him. Just days before, Hitler had committed suicide, leaving the Third Reich in turmoil. As the remnants of the Nazi regime crumbled, Emil grappled with the consequences of his allegiance. He had once believed in the ideals espoused by his leaders, but as he wandered through the desolate streets, the horror of the past few years gnawed at his conscience. With every step, the memories of fallen comrades and innocent lives lost echoed painfully in his mind. He was not alone in his torment. In an abandoned cafe nearby, Sarah Cohen sat clutching her late father's journal. A Jewish woman who had narrowly escaped the horrors of concentration camps, she had returned to Berlin under the guise of a journalist. The city was a ghost of its former self, but within its ruins lay buried secrets that could unravel the very fabric of post-war Europe. Sarah's father had been an outspoken critic of the Nazi regime, and his writings held truths that could either redeem or condemn her people in the eyes of the world. As Emil stumbled upon the cafe, he saw Sarah, a flicker of hope illuminating the shadows of despair. Their eyes met, and an unspoken understanding passed between them. Both were survivors of a war that had ravaged their souls, yet they stood on opposite sides of a profound divide. Emil was a soldier of the Reich, and Sarah was the daughter of those who had suffered under that regime. "Why are you here?" Emil asked, his voice hoarse from dust and desolation. "This city is no place for you. I could say the same to you. But I am here to uncover the truth, to make sense of the madness," Sarah replied. She opened her father's journal and began to read aloud passages that detailed the atrocities committed during the Holocaust. Each word struck Emil like a spear, piercing through the fog of his indoctrination. "Your father, he was brave," he said, grappling with the weight of her revelation. "It matters more than anything," Sarah asserted, her voice rising with conviction. "It is the only thing that can heal these wounds." Outside, the rumble of approaching Allied forces grew louder. Emil knew that the war within had only begun. He stood at the precipice of a new conflict, one that could shake the foundations of history itself. As the echoes of the past clashed with the promise of the future, a singular truth emerged. Emil and Sarah would have to navigate a treacherous landscape of lies, guilt, and redemption. Over the next few days, they formed an uneasy alliance. Emil shared tales of his experiences, revealing grim events that had not reached the ears of historians. He spoke of the atrocities committed by the SS, the blind eye turned by many soldiers, and the complicity of ordinary citizens. Sarah listened, capturing it all in her notebook, but distrust lingered in her heart. How could she believe the words of a man wearing the remnants of a tainted regime? As they delved deeper into the layers of Berlin's history, they uncovered the secret police document that hinted at a hidden bunker beneath the city, a repository of Nazi war crimes that had been long forgotten. The document spoke of a cache of evidence that could expose high-ranking officials and reveal the depths of the regime's evil. "We need to find it," Sarah insisted, the fire of determination igniting her spirit. "This is our chance to hold them accountable." Emil hesitated. "What if we uncover something that puts you in danger? I can protect you, but I will not risk your life for this. Every day that passes without the truth is another victory for those who perpetrated the lies," she countered passionately. Their debate hung in the air like a thick fog, but the urgency of their mission was palpable. They needed to find the bunker before Allied forces flooded the city, potentially destroying the evidence without ever knowing its significance. Both driven by personal demons, they set out into the labyrinthine underbelly of Berlin, where secrets lay hidden in the shadows. As they navigated through the crumbling infrastructure, the tension between them began to thaw. Emil's knowledge of the city's defenses and his military training complemented Sarah's tenacity and intellect. Together, they maneuvered past barricades and debris, their footsteps echoing in the silence of a city that was reckoning with its past. They arrived at an unassuming entrance obscured by rubble. A heavy steel door, half buried and rusting, loomed before them. Emil's heart raced. "If we are caught," he faltered, his mind racing with the consequences of discovery. "But we can turn back now," Sarah urged, her eyes shining with resolve. "This is it, Emil." With a grunt, Emil pushed against the door until it creaked open. Darkness loomed beyond, thick and suffocating. They descended into the bowels of the bunker, flat lights illuminating the damp walls. The air grew colder, and an unsettling sense of dread settled over them as they ventured deeper into the abyss. The room opened into a vast chamber, cluttered with documents, photographs, and artifacts of a horrendous legacy. Sarah gasped as she laid eyes on the remnants of a bureaucracy that had mechanized death and destruction. Here lay the truth, the unvarnished reality of the war that had engulfed their lives. As they sifted through the papers, Nim leaped out at them the code name for an operation that had sought to eliminate entire populations in the most inhumane ways imaginable. Emily's hands trembled as he grasped the weight of what he held. "This could change everything," he said, his voice reverberating in disbelief. But just as hope flickered within them, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance. Panic surged through Emil. They scrambled to gather as much evidence as they could, but the sound grew louder, the unmistakable heaviness of boots marching in their direction. They had entered a race against time, caught between the relentless pursuit of justice and the looming threat of discovery. As the door to the chamber creaked ominously, Emil and Sarah exchanged a glance, a shared understanding that the truth they sought was both a weapon and a curse. In that moment, the weight of their pasts and the uncertainty of the future fused into a singular resolve. They would not only unveil the horrors of the Nazi regime, they would also confront their own demons, bound by the unspoken truths that had shaped their lives. The sound of footsteps grew closer, and their hearts raced in tandem as they braced for the confrontation that lay ahead. The battle for redemption had begun, and the stakes were higher than ever before. "Readied," Emil whispered, the tension palpable. "Always," Sarah replied, steeling herself for what was to come. With the evidence of a dark history in their hands, they would uncover a legacy that could alter their world forever. The true story of Germany's war history was about to be unleashed, and they stood at the center of it all. But as they prepared to escape, Emma's mind flickered back to the faces of his fallen comrades, the ghosts of a war that still haunted him. What price would they pay for the truth? Would it redeem them, or would it plunge them deeper into the abyss? The footsteps grew louder, and the door began to creak open, the darkness of the past threatening to swallow them whole. They exchanged one last determined glance, knowing that the truth would demand a reckoning. And with that, they charged into the unknown, where the line between hero and villain blurred, destined to uncover the unspeakable truths of Germany's war history. The future awaited them, and what they unearthed would change everything. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a dimly lit corridor that snaked away into darkness. Emil grabbed Sarah's wrist, pulling her toward a narrow passageway, heart pounding in his chest. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, echoed ominously behind them. They had little time. The bunker was a labyrinth, and escape routes were limited. "Which way?" Sarah whispered urgently, glancing over her shoulder as the noise grew closer. "Left," Emil replied, his military instincts kicking in. They darted down the corridor, the smell of damp earth and decay thick in the air. Each step felt like a countdown, a reminder that they were not just searching for truth, they were risking everything to reveal them. They needed to find the exit before their pursuers became more than just a distant threat. As they navigated the winding tunnels, Emil's mind raced. He thought of the evidence they had gathered, the documents that outlined the horrors of the Holocaust and the cold calculus with which the Nazi regime had eliminated dissent. With every turn, he felt the burden of his past choices weighing heavier. Sarah's voice, laced with fear, broke through his thoughts. "Trust me," he replied, trying to project confidence he didn't fully feel. "We will, we have to." They turned a corner and stumbled into another chamber, this one even larger than the last. It was filled with remnants of the Nazis' twisted machinery. Emil's eyes darted around, spotting stacks of crates, some marked with the insignia of the Third Reich, others bearing labels of various concentration camps. He hesitated, the gravity of what they were surrounded by almost too much to bear. "Emil," Sarah's voice snapped him back. "We need to keep moving." "Right," he nodded, forcing the memories of his past to the back of his mind. They could not afford distractions now. As they sprinted through the chamber, a beam of light suddenly pierced the darkness, illuminating their path ahead. A figure emerged from the shadows, an SS officer, flanked by 2 armed soldiers. They had been cornered. The officer barked, a menacing smile creeping across his face as he raised his weapon. Instinct kicked in, Emil pushed Sarah behind him, his protective instincts overwhelming. He shouted, shoving her toward a narrow exit on the opposite side of the room. Sarah hesitated, fear gripping her. "Emil, go," he shouted again, adrenaline surging as he grabbed a broken metal pipe from the ground. "I'll hold them off." Without another word, Sarah dashed toward the exit, her heart pounding. She could hear Emma's footsteps behind her, his determination palpable even as danger loomed. The officer opened fire, bullets ricocheting off the walls, narrowly missing Emil. Emil yelled, diving to the floor as he swung the metal pipe at the closest soldier, the clang of metal on bone reverberating through the chamber. As Emil fought, Sarah reached the exit, finding it blocked by a heavy metal grate. Panic flooded her veins as she struggled to lift it. The sounds of the struggle behind her pushed her to her limits. She could hear Emil's grunts as he fought off the attackers, each sound igniting both admiration and fear within her. Emil shouted, summoning every ounce of strength within him. He dropped the pipe, quickly reaching for a nearby crate and shoving it toward the soldiers. It crashed into one of them, causing a momentary distraction. Sarah continued to wrestle with the grate, finally managing to pry it open just enough to squeeze through. She turned back, watching as Emil grappled with the remaining soldier, their struggle sending them tumbling toward the edge of the chamber. She screamed, but he was too lost in the fight, determination etched across his features. With a swift, brutal motion, Emil threw the soldier aside, but the officer was already advancing. He aimed his weapon at Emil, a cold calculation in his eyes. "Your time is up, German," the officer sneered, finger hovering over the trigger. In a split second, Sarah made a choice. She lunged back into the chamber, her heart pounding as she reached toward a jagged piece of rubble. With all her might, she hurled it at the officer. The makeshift weapon struck true, knocking the gun from his hand and disarming him. Emil shouted, scrambling to his feet as the chaos erupted around them. Sarah watched Emil push forward, tackling the officer to the ground, fist flying in a blow of motion. The soldier was momentarily stunned, giving Emil the precious second he needed. Sarah's breath hitched as she watched the fight unfold, torn between her instinct to help and the urgency of escape. "Take the evidence," Emil grunted, pointing toward the exit. "I'll be right behind you. The button now," he roared, and she turned, racing toward the opening with a final glance back at Emil. He was a warrior, a soldier fighting against the ghost of his past. She raced through the narrow space, adrenaline coursing through her as the sunlight broke through the darkness. Emerging into the fresh air felt surreal, but there was no time to pause. She pressed forward, sprinting down a desolate street lined with crumbling buildings. The ruins of Berlin surrounded her, a haunting reminder of the horrors that had unfolded within. She could hear Emil's footsteps behind her, but the sound of sirens began to fill the air, a symphony of chaos as Allied forces moved through the city. Emil shouted, catching up with her. He grabbed her hand, pulling her into a nearby alley just as the first Allied soldiers rounded the corner, their faces hardened by the war they had just waged. Sarah panted, still holding the evidence tightly against her chest. "We need to find a safe place," Emil replied, scanning the area. As they dug deeper into the shadows, the reality of what they had uncovered began to settle over them. The documents they carried held the power to expose and condemn, to reveal the truth of a war that sought to erase history. But uncertainty loomed over their heads like dark clouds. What if the Allies don't believe us? Sarah asked, fear creeping back in. What if they see you as just another soldier of the Reich? They have to listen, Emil insisted, his eyes steady. Too many lives have been lost. We must make them understand the depth of the evil we've uncovered. Their resolve solidified as they slipped through the shattered remnants of Berlin, knowing that their fight was only just beginning. They were now entangled in a conflict that transcended mere survival. It was a battle for truth, for justice, and for the many who had suffered under the Nazi regime. As they navigated the ruins, a chilling realization washed over them. The war was far from over. It had only transformed into a new battle, one that would require courage and sacrifice to ensure the truth was never again buried in the darkness. With their hearts racing and the echoes of the past lingering in their minds, they knew they had to face the inevitable. What awaited them was unknown, but they were determined to confront it together, united by their quest for redemption. And as Emil and Sarah emerged from the shadows, the weight of the world rested on their shoulders, but they stood unwavering. The truth would fight for its voice, and they would be its champions. Little did they know, the next steps would lead them into a confrontation not just with the remnants of a shattered regime, but with the very ideals that had defined their lives. The line between past and future blurred, and in the heart of Berlin, the next chapter of their fight for history was about to unfold. As Emil and Sarah slipped further into the shadows of Berlin, uncertainty loomed over them like a storm cloud. They moved through the ruins, every corner echoing with the ghosts of the past. The documents they carried were a double-edged sword, fraught with potential danger. They clutched them tightly, a tangible reminder of the darkness they had unearthed. Their immediate task was to find shelter, a place to regroup and strategize. Each moment spent in the open felt like a gamble, and as the air thickened with the sounds of conflict, they knew they had to act decisively. Crumbling buildings surrounded them like sentinels, remnants of a city that once thrived. A flicker of hope ignited in Emma's heart when he spotted an old butcher shop that still had its store ajar. Inside, Emma urged, pulling Sarah toward the entrance. They slid through the narrow opening, the scent of aged wood and iron mingling with the smell of decay. Inside, the shop was a relic, the walls lined with rusting hooks and shelves emptied of their former contents. A heavy silence enveloped them. Emma quickly closed the door, ensuring they were hidden from prying eyes. Sarah whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "We need to catch our breath and assess what we have," Emma replied, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of intrusion. They moved to the back of the shop, where a staircase led down to a cellar. "Let us go down," he suggested, hoping the basement would provide added security. They descended into the cool, dark space, the air thick with dampness and the scent of earth. Flicking on a flashlight, Emma illuminated the surroundings, revealing a small room filled with crates and barrels, remnants of a once bustling business. They settled on the floor, leaning against the wall, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. "Let us take a look at what we found," Sarah insisted, her voice firm despite the fear that still lingered. With shaking hands, she opened the bag they had hastily thrown the documents into, pulling out pages marked with names and operations that would shock the world. "They are horrific," Emma murmured as he read over her shoulder. "These papers detail systematic plans for extermination, locations of mass graves." Each revelation felt like a dagger, piercing through any remaining loyalty to the regime he had once served. Sarah's voice shook as she turned a page. "And this is a list of those who were complicit, including high-ranking officials." She looked up at Emma, her eyes wide. "This can just be another footnote in history. We have to make sure it reaches the Allies." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "But we have to be careful. There are still loyalists in the city, and they won't hesitate to eliminate any threats to their regime, even in these dying days." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, muffled but growing closer. Emma's heart raced again. "We need to be ready to move," he said urgently, his military training resurfacing. "If we're rediscovered here, we won't have a chance." They crouched low, breath shallow, straining to hear the footsteps. The faint sound of voices drifted in, angry and agitated. 2 figures stood outside the butcher shop, raised voices punctuating the tense air. Emma's instincts kicked in. He moved to the dusty window, careful not to draw attention to themselves. Peering out, he saw 2 men in SS uniforms, their expressions menacing as they scanned the street. "They were looking for us," Emma whispered, turning back to Sarah, who was already gathering the documents. "We need to act now, but where do we go?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emma considered their options, weighing risk against necessity. "There is a sewer access point not far from here. If we can get underground, we may be able to slip past them." He gestured toward a small trapdoor in the corner of the cellar. "Let us do it," Sarah replied, determination replacing her earlier fear. They hurried to the trapdoor, Emma wrenching it open with a creak that echoed ominously in the silence. "If we get lost down there," Sarah began, uncertainty creeping back into her voice. "We want tea," Emma interjected firmly. "Stay close and follow my lead." Together, they descended into the darkness, the foul stench of the sewer hitting them like a wave. Water trickled beneath their feet, and the space was cramped, lit only by Emma's flashlight. They moved stealthily, listening for any signs of pursuit above. As they navigated the winding tunnels, the weight of their mission pressed heavily upon them. They were not just fleeing, they were carrying the truth, a truth that could either redeem the past or plunge them deeper into the abyss of conflict. After what felt like hours, they reached a junction in the sewers. Emma paused, the echo of distant voices above urging him to make a decision. "We can either head toward the river, where we might find an escape route, or we can try to surface near the Allied command. It is a risk either way." Sarah looked at him, fear and resolve mixing in her eyes. "Allied command, we have to make them understand what we found. It is our only chance for justice, and then we go up," Emma affirmed, his heart racing. Together, they took a deep breath and chose the path toward the command, hoping the weight of history would guide them. As they maneuvered through the dark, their journey became fraught with echoes of the past, reminders of the lives lost and the atrocities committed. With every step they took, the burden of what they carried felt heavier, yet their resolve remained unbroken. Eventually, they reached a grate that led to the surface. The sounds of battle faded into the distance, replaced by the distant rumble of allied vehicles. Emil glanced at Sarah, his heart pounding with the weight of both fear and hope. Ready, she affirmed, her voice steady. With one final effort, Emil moved the grate aside and climbed up into the fading light of the day. He reached back for Sarah, helping her up as they emerged into the chaos of a city at war, alive with the sounds of conflict and the promise of liberation. "Keep your head down," he instructed, scanning the street filled with soldiers and civilians alike. They were in enemy territory now, and each face could either be a friend or a foe. They ventured cautiously, the documents clutched tightly against Sarah's chest. The sight of soldiers' allied troops was both a relief and a source of anxiety. They needed to find a way to present their findings without raising suspicion, but where to start? Over there, Emil pointed to a small gathering of soldiers. An officer stood at the forefront, giving orders as they prepared for their next move. "Are you sure?" Sarah hesitated, doubt creeping into her mind. "What if they see you as just a soldier of the Rye? We'll never know unless we try," Emil replied, determination etched in his features. They took a deep breath and approached the group, anxious yet resolute. "Excuse me," Emil called, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The soldiers turned, weapons at the ready, eyes narrowing as they took in the sight of the two civilians. "What do you want?" the officer snapped, his posture rigid. "We have vital information," Emil explained quickly, his heart racing. "We need to speak to someone in charge now." The officer eyed them suspiciously. "What makes you think we should trust you?" Sarah stepped forward, clutching the documents tightly. "Because we can expose the truth of the Nazi regime. We have evidence of war crimes. Do you need to see this?" The tension hung thick in the air as the officer considered their plea. The past and present collided in that moment, the horrors of the war waiting for recognition, for justice. "Stand back and stay where you are," the officer finally ordered, signaling for his men to lower their weapons. As the officer stepped closer, Emil's heart raced again. This was their moment, the beginning of a new fight, not just for themselves, but for every victim lost to the horrors of war. "Show me," the officer commanded, eyeing the documents with skepticism. Emil stepped forward, determination flowing through him. He was about to see the truth of what happened here. A truth that cannot remain buried any longer. But just as the officer reached for the documents, a sudden explosion ripped through the air, shaking the ground beneath them. Chaos erupted as soldiers scrambled for cover, and the weight of history hung in the balance. In that moment, Emil and Sarah realized they were not merely fighting for the truth, they were fighting for their lives. Despite the turmoil, they stood resolute, ready to face whatever darkness lay ahead. The battle for redemption was far from over, and the unspoken truths of Germany's war history were on the brink of exposure. As the dust settled amidst the chaos, they braced themselves for the fight of their lives, where every decision could change the course of history. And they understood whatever happened next would shape not only their futures, but the legacy of a nation still. The explosion shattered the brief calm, sending debris flying and scattering the soldiers into frenzied panic. Emil instinctively grabbed for Sarah, pulling her behind a nearby truck as chaos erupted around them. The once clear objective of presenting their findings to the Allied officer was now buried beneath the dust and debris of war. "Stay low," Emil barked, adrenaline surging through him as he scanned for threats. The sounds of gunfire echoed all around, drowning out the cries of confusion. His military instincts kicked in once more, but this time he was fighting not as a soldier of the Reich, but as a man seeking redemption. "Where do we go now?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear, but also with a flicker of determination. The documents in her grip felt heavier than ever. "Follow me," Emil said, leading her around the truck and toward a narrow alley that ran parallel to the street. They dashed into the shadows, the world of chaos momentarily fading behind them. They stumbled into the alley, panting and catching their breath as they pressed their backs against the cold, damp wall. Emma's mind raced, calculations swelling as he tried to devise a plan. "We need to find another way to get to the command center. The LL will be too busy managing the chaos to care about us right now." Sarah nodded, determination hardening her features. "And once we do, we can expose the truth. We have to make them listen." "Agreed," Emma replied, his voice steadying. "Let us head toward the back of the building. There might be an entrance that leads us closer to the command post." As they moved silently through the alley, the sounds of battle began to fade, replaced by the distant cries of civilians and the rumble of military vehicles. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke, and a shiver ran down Emily's spine. The war had brought so much suffering, and now, more than ever, they needed to ensure that the past would not repeat itself. They arrived at a rear entrance, the heavy wooden door slightly ajar. Emil pushed it open cautiously, peering inside to find a dimly lit corridor. "This way," he urged Sarah as they slipped inside. The hallway was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the turmoil outside. They crept forward, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust on the floor. As they reached the end of the corridor, Emil spotted a staircase leading up. "We can get a better view from the upper floors," he suggested. They climbed the stairs quietly, each step a reminder of the urgency of their mission. At the top, they found themselves in a small room filled with outdated equipment and old maps. Emil quickly scanned the area. "We can use this as a vantage point," he said, making his way to a window. He peered outside as the battle raged on, observing the movements of Allied troops and SS remnants. "There's a command post a few blocks down," he muttered, his brow furrowing in concentration. "But it is heavily guarded. We'll need a distraction to get past." Sarah was already flipping through the old maps scattered around the room. "What if we create a diversion, something that draws their attention away from us?" Emil's eyes lit up with possibility. "If we can find something explosive, we could throw it toward the opposite side of the building." "Over there," Sarah pointed, indicating a crate in the corner marked with hazardous symbols. They rushed over, cautiously opening the crate to reveal a collection of old grenades. "Perfect," Emil grinned, seizing one of the grenades. "We can launch it and make a run for the command. Let us do it," she urged, her heart racing. With a steady hand, Emil pulled the pin from the grenade and tossed it out the window into the distance. They ducked back as the explosion erupted, sending shards of debris flying and creating a deafening noise that echoed through the air. Emil shouted, and they bolted for the door, their hearts pounding in unison. As they raced down the stairs, chaos erupted again, with soldiers rushing to respond to the explosion. They navigated through the building quickly, pushing through doors and down corridors until they found themselves outside. Emil led Sarah toward the command post, every instinct telling him they were running out of time. As they reached the street corner, they spotted the command post ahead, a small gathering of officers directing troops. Emil gasped as they approached. "Wait," Sarah hissed, her eyes widening as she noticed a group of soldiers standing guard. "How do we get past them?" Emil's mind raced, but there was no time for hesitation. "We can T-approach through the front. There is a side entrance, let us try that." They ducked into an alleyway, hearts pounding, and circled around the command post. As they neared a side door, Emil caught sight of two soldiers standing by a staircase leading downstairs. "Distract them," Emil whispered to Sarah, who nodded resolutely. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling slightly. "Excuse me," she called, her tone authoritative. The soldiers turned, their expression shifting from surprise to suspicion. "What do you want?" one of them demanded. Emil seized the moment, darting past Sarah, slipping into the side entrance and racing down the stairs. "I'll find a way to get the officer," he shouted back to her. He descended into the dimly lit basement, scanning the area for anything useful. The sound of raised voices filtered down from above, and Emil's heart raced. Time was slipping away. Above, Sarah was holding her ground, keeping the soldiers distracted, but he knew she couldn't hold them off forever. He noticed a small room to his left, filled with more maps and documents. This could be it, he muttered, gathering as much as he could carry. Suddenly, the door burst open, and one of the soldiers charged in. "What are you doing here?" he shouted, raising his weapon. Before Emil could react, he lunged forward, tackling the soldier to the ground. They struggled momentarily, but Emil's desperation gave him strength, and he managed to overpower him, knocking him unconscious. He shouted, the urgency of his voice echoing through the basement. "We need to go." He grabbed the documents and raced back up the stairs, meeting Sarah just as the soldiers began to break free from her distraction. "Quick," he urged, motioning for her to follow him. They slipped through the side entrance and into the chaos outside, where the battle raged on. Emil grabbed Sarah's hand, adrenaline fueling their escape as they sprinted toward the command post. "Over there." Emil pointed to an officer standing apart from the others, giving orders and assessing the battlefield. "That one." They dashed toward him, pushing through the throngs of soldiers. Emil shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The officer turned, his expression worrying. "What do you want?" he snapped, eyeing the documents Emil clutched. "We have crucial information about the Nazi regime," Emil said, urgency lacing his voice. "You need to see this now. It is about the war crimes they've committed." The officer hesitated, casting a glance around him, But Emil pressed forward, urgency consuming him. The lives depend on this. It is not just papers, it is proof of genocide and murder. Enough, the officer barked, stepping closer. What makes you think I should trust you, soldier? Emil's heart raced as he held out the documents. You have to believe me. We risked our lives to come here, our lives and the lives of countless others. Let me see, the officer said, finally taking the papers from Emil's hand. He began reading, his face shifting from skepticism to disbelief as he processed the contents. As the officer's brows lowered and his mouth tightened, Emil and Sarah stood on the precipice of fate. This changes everything, he finally murmured, glancing up at them. Get me a secure line to command. We need to take this to the higher-ups immediately. As chaos roared around them, Emil and Sarah exchanged a glance, a mix of relief and fear washing over them. They had done it. They had fought against the odds to reveal the truth. In the days that followed, the world would begin to reckon with the horrors of the past, the evidence of the Nazi regime's atrocities forcing conversations that could no longer be ignored. Emil and Sarah had ignited a fire that would bring not just accountability, but also a chance for healing, a chance to honor the memories of those lost and forge a new path toward understanding. In the heart of a shattered Germany, they had uncovered the unspoken truths of a dark history, transforming their pain into purpose. And as they faced an uncertain future together, they knew their journey was far from over. It was only the beginning of a long path towards reconciliation and redemption. For in the aftermath of war, the real battle lay not just in the physical realm, but in the hearts and minds of those who dared to confront the truth